Very good evening to you and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. Want to welcome all our viewers, wherever you are, whether you're in Guyana or in the diaspora. Welcome. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Politics 101. Tonight we are going to continue talking about extrajudicial killings in Guyana. We know that last week, Wednesday morning, we woke up to the news that Orrin Boston was shot dead in his home, invaded by the SWAT team, and we're still awaiting the files to be sent to the Director of Public Prosecution so that she can advise. We understand the files have been sent to the Police Complaints Committee. What we want is for the files to be sent to the DPP and the DPP to instruct that the shooter be charged for murder, not manslaughter, be charged for murder. That's the first line of business as far as Brother Boston's death is concerned. The shooter and those who were complicit there on the site have to be brought before the law and to be punished for that offense. Nothing short will suffice. We have to punish them so that it will be a form of deterrence going forward, because we've got to stop. We've got to stop this extrajudicial killing. It means that we have to make it very difficult for them to kill our brothers. And so the first thing is that those who pull the trigger must be punished, severely punished. And so we have to ensure that message must be heard loud and clear. We also want the intellectual authors, that is, those who are in the hierarchy of the police force, who are taking instructions from politicians. They too have to be punished. The motto of the police is to protect and serve all of the people of Guyana, not to serve political masters. And so if we're going to stop extrajudicial killings of African men and others, the police have to begin to act like a professional police force. They have to stop taking instructions from politicians of any kind, of any stripe. That must be our second demand. Our first demand, of course, is for those SWAT team members to be brought before the court of law and to be punished. And then secondly, the hierarchy, the high command of the police force, those who gave the orders to the underlings, they too must be punished. They too must be punished. Our second demand is that those who gave the order must be made to pay, because it was because of their order that a life was taken, an innocent life was taken. And the objective there is for those I command in the police force to act like policemen and women, and not to act like water boys for politicians and water girls. So we have to focus on them. And then thirdly, we have to focus on the politicians. The politicians who hide behind the police and give orders for the police to move against persons who they perceive not to be politically loyal to them. So our demands have to be clear. Punish those who pull the trigger. Discipline those who gave the order. And take on the politicians who are turning the police force whenever they're in power into a political force. We don't want a political force. We want a police force to protect and defend people, not to protect and defend politicians. And so we are going to keep this matter on the front burner. We are not going to forget. We're not going to forget. They bank on us forgetting. You go right back to Shaka Blair, they bank on us forgetting. Ronald Waddle, they bank on us forgetting. Crummy Wing, they bank on us forgetting. The hundreds of young black men between 1992 and 2015, they bank on us forgetting. The Linden martyrs, they bank on us forgetting. They bank on us forgetting the attempted murder of Chris Jones. Because it was attempted murder. They invaded his home, opened his door against his will, terrorized him and his family. They bank on us forgetting that. They bank on us forgetting Peter Headley. They bank on us forgetting the Henry Boys and the other young man, Arish Singh, who was served up as collateral damage. They bank on us forgetting. And we've got to vow not to forget. So tonight we're going to continue talking about extrajudicial killings. And we're asking the question, what does race have to do with it? Because they're asking that question. We know what race has to do with it. We know it's all about race. But they, the politicians, their PPP people, are asking what race got to do with it. And tonight we're going to answer that question. What race got to do about it? I'm expecting to be joined by Lincoln Lewis, Adriana Thomas, and Vincent Alexander. They're joining me later on. What race got to do with it? So they would like to say that Orin Boston and all the other names that I called, and all those whose names we can't remember, we're asking the question, what do they have in common? What all of them have in common? They're African Guyanese. They're, for the most part, African Guyanese men. What do they have in common? They are African Guyanese men. And as we have said on this program before, extrajudicial killings in Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean, in America, extrajudicial killings are more the order of the day. Extrajudicial killings are more the rule than the exception. So we are not saying that extrajudicial killings are confined to one era. We have had extrajudicial killings going right back to the period immediately after emancipation, when the police force was formed in 1839. Ever since then, we've had judicial killings. We've had judicial killings under the colonial masters. We've had judicial killings under post-colonial governments of all parties. But what is noticeable is that since the PPP got back to power in 1992, extrajudicial killings have become more frequent. And we're not talking about 1 and 2 and 3. We're talking about hundreds. We're talking about a pattern. And if we see a pattern, then it means that it's part of a larger policy. These killings are part of a larger policy. These killings make assumptions about those who are targeted to be killed and those who are killed. The police make assumptions. Politicians make assumptions about the people who are being killed. They make assumptions about black men, young black men. They make assumptions about young black men. They make assumptions about the value of their lives. They make assumptions about the consequences. You know, the police force is made up predominantly of African Guyanese. Those who they kill extrajudicially are mostly African Guyanese. So the rulers of the PPP can say this is black on black crime. This is black on black, not crime. This is black on black. This is a black on black problem. Black people who in the police force who are shooting their own black people, it has nothing to do with us. They make those assumptions. If the policemen are mostly Indian Guyanese, and the victims African Guyanese, then there is a clear and present problem. But it's mostly black men who are shooting black men. So the regime hopes to get away by saying their hands are clean. These are black people killing black people. So there's a problem with black people there. But we've got to explain that, as we have been doing. We've got to explain that, as we've been doing. We've got to explain why black people are predominantly in the police force. It was not by accident, it was deliberate. And we've got to examine the conditions under which they're serving in the police force. The dynamics, the culture of gratefulness, which has been around for a very long time. So we're going to be talking about some of those issues tonight. Adriana Thomas is here with us. Let's welcome her to the program. Audriana is a political activist, social activist, commentator. She writes frequently in the newspapers. She's not known as a race person, like some of us are. So she doesn't come to this subject with the baggage that people like myself come with, having been in the trenches speaking that talk for a very long time. Audriana, welcome.
Dr. Hines, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. How have you been doing?
I have been doing, the past month has been a bit, or the past weeks, I have had some challenges, but those challenges are not they're important, they're urgent, but this discussion this evening is also extremely important. So I had to put off some of those things which have been engaging my attention because I'd like to be a part of this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. The last time you were on this program, or if not the last time, certainly one of the times that you came on, you did express that you had begun for the first time to feel racism, something that you had not consciously been aware of. I hope I'm paraphrasing you right there, but that there was something about what has gone on in the last year that you're smelling racism. Am I correct with that?
Dr. Hines, you're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, what has happened over the past year in Guyana, it has to some extent, I am disoriented. It has thrown me off course, so to speak. And so I'm hoping that we're going to really have a frank discussion about race in Guyana, because except we accept that we have a problem with race, except we accept that they are the judicial killings, like for example, the gentleman who was shot in SU Cribble, there's a strong inference that race was a factor. And so if we would really like to solve, Dr. Hines, our 55-year-old race problem in Guyana, it's longer than that, but I'm speaking in the context of independence. I'm speaking in the context of independence because we are now in control of our own destiny. So hence, I'm referring the 1966 period to now. So if we're willing to find solutions to our problems, we have to first of all accept that Guyana has a race problem. And I'll even go as far, I'm getting into the discussion a bit. I saw the president, Irfan Ali, in discussions with the pastors in New York, said that there are no discrimination, there's no discrimination in Guyana. Well, I'm saying to the pastors of New York that President Ali's government is highly slanted towards the practice of racism. I'm saying to the pastors in Guyana that President Ali's government is highly slanted towards discrimination and racism. And I believe that except we're able to say that and to say to President Ali, here, enough is enough. Stop this talk about no discrimination and no racism. Let's address the issue. We have a race problem. Black people in Guyana are being discriminated against. Black, and now it has become Black and poor people. If you're Black and you're poor, then you're being discriminated against. So, and it doesn't matter whether you're poor and you're East Indian, you're poor and you're Chinese, Portuguese, if you're Black and you're poor. Because what is happening, we're moving from merely having an ethnic issue and a race issue to now having a class issue. So the apex of the triangle in our economy is narrowing. And therefore, except we're able to say to President Ali, for me, Dr. Hines, after the killing of that man, shooting of that gentleman in his bed last week, enough is enough. Stop the talk about we don't have racism and we don't have discrimination, and let's address the issues in Guyana.
Yes. Let's go back. Let's go to the killing of Orin Boston in Gatineau. And you said that it has all the markings of race. Please expand on that for our audience.
Dr. Hines, first of all, we have, before an act is done, there must be a mental process. And I want to take you beyond the mere act of shooting, of killing, murdering, or in Boston in his bed. It's about value. And it's about, I think one of the things, and this is where I say it with absolutely no apologies, one of the things that President Ali's government is establishing is that one group, some groups in Guyana, whether they be an elite group, whether they be a race group, has more value than other groups. So let's remove the curtains and go a bit behind the scenes and understand what is going on in the minds of not only merely the people who are carrying out the acts, but those who are, and I'll speak about the authority, because I think it's important that we speak to the about and to the authority. So President Ali's government is establishing, and not just President Ali's government, we're seeing a characterization of a certain type of governance under, I would say, particularly, I'll get right in. Can I get right into the discussion, Dr. Hines?
Yes, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay. I am ready. We have seen under, and here is where I want to go to authority. Nothing happens without authority. If you also understand things both in the natural realm and in the spiritual realm, nothing happens without authority. Let's deal with the extrajudicial killings. There must be a context. There must be an authority. And so it is obvious that what happened, the shooting of Orin Boston in his bed last week, whoever carried out that act, they knew that whoever is in, or whomever, or whichever system is in authority will support something like that. And this is where I think we as a people, we need to say no. Even if the system will support it, as a people, we will not. And this is where I was thinking a lot today about the Human Rights Declaration, Article 1, that says all human beings are born equal. But some people say that some are born more equal than others. And I think I get the impression, so when I said that I've never experienced this level of overt and intentional racism in Guyana like I do now, the saying that all human beings are born equal than others, more equal than others. This reminds me of what is happening in Guyana in terms of placing a higher value on some groups than on others. And so I think as a people, it's for me, it's not for the government to say enough is enough. I am saying as a Guyanese, enough is enough. Dr. Hines, you must say as a Guyanese, enough is enough. This must not happen in our country anymore. As a people of Guyana, it doesn't matter whether you're Black, whether you're East Indian, whether you're Portuguese, whether you're Chinese, whether you're a businessman. Dr. Hines, enough is enough. We must decide that we will not sit under a system or in a country that goes into the home of a family and kills a husband, a father, a brother, somebody's son. It cuts against the nature of who we are as Guyanese. And I'm saying it doesn't matter whether Orin Boston was Black. It doesn't matter to me whether he was East Indian, whether he was Chinese, Portuguese. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is that Orin Boston was a human being. What matters to me is that Guyana has a judicial system that is adequate enough to address the issues if its citizens fall counter to the laws of the country. What matters to me is that the system of governance that we have, from the president right down, must conform to the laws of Guyana. What matters to me is that the Guyana police force must never again be engaged in an act like that. Dr. Hines, I am so enraged by what has happened that you will probably have to calm me down on this program. I am that enraged because I see Oren Boston. He could have been my brother. Oren Boston could have been my child, not quite in terms of age, but Oren Boston could have been my cousin. Oren Boston could have been some relative of mine. And I'm saying, as a people, Dr. Hines, we talk about, under the PPP government, we talk about extrajudicial killing. And I think the time has come for us to say that this must not happen again. It must not happen. Its time has come for us to tell President Ali, stop the talk about non-discrimination and non-racism. We have racism in Guyana. We have discrimination in Guyana. And the pastors in New York must understand that. And President Ali must stop saying what he's saying. As a matter of fact, I'll go a little further. When the CIOG had written that note and said, or that statement, that this is the Central Islamic Organization. And they said,
having some, yes, go ahead.
And they said that President Ali, something about, President Ali. I thought when I read that statement, I thought that President Ali, it's one thing for the CIOG to say that you're a good man, but it's another thing. Allah is a righteous God. He's an holy God. So it's one thing for an earthly organization to say that you're doing well, but what is important is that Allah says that you recognize that he's holy and he's righteous. And so I am saying I am so angry about what has happened, and so much I can't find a word to express, and so think that we should not allow this to happen again. So this discussion for me, it's not so much about what has happened, but we must not, as a people, continue to talk about the hundreds of people who died from extrajudicial killing. We must not, as a people, be talking. Cut the talk. Stop the talk now. It's time for us to get the government to understand. It's time for us to get President Ali to understand. Stop the lies. Stop the untruth. We have issues. Let's deal with them.
There you have it, Adriana Thomas, saying what we have been saying here for the last week and a half. I've made my point, made myself very clear. I'm done crying. I'm done weeping. I'm done crying. I'm done weeping. And that's what the sister is saying there. She's done complaining. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. And that is the challenge before all Guyanese, in particular African Guyanese whose sons and daughters are the victims of that violence. But it's something for all Guyanese, all Guyanese. Indian people cannot and should not stand back and watch their sisters and brothers being slaughtered by a government that they voted for. They have an equal responsibility, because whatever the government is doing, it's doing in their name. I'm sure the vast majority of Indian Guyanese are opposed to extrajudicial killings, but they have to come out of the shadows and speak up. Speak up, because the blood of Boston and all the others would be on your hands too, because you voted for the government. That's okay. We all vote for parties. But we have a responsibility that when that party or that government crosses the line, we've got to speak out. I am making it very clear. If the coalition government were in office and Indian people were being executed like that, they would hear from me. They heard from me for less than that. Thank God. under the coalition, there wasn't extrajudicial killings. But if there were, I would stand up. If my brothers and sisters, East Indians or Amerindians, been murdered, it would be my human responsibility, my national responsibility. And if I say that I love my people, then I cannot love when my people are doing wrong. That's the difference between David Hines and some of the others on the other side. I love Black people, but I don't love when Black people are doing wrong. Look at my history, check it. I spoke out against Black authoritarianism. When those young men went into Buxton and they were killing East Indians because they were East Indians, I spoke out. Along with the late Andaye and Brother Yussi Kwayano. Sister Andaye said, not in my name. And we spoke out against the slaughtering of Indian people. Check my records.
Dr. Hines,
Indian people have to stand up. Where are the voices of Ravi Dev and Ramarak, Betoram, and all the others who write frequently in the newspaper about rigged elections? What about the rigged police system that kills mostly men of the other ethnic group? Where are their voices? Where are their voices? We are joined by Brother Lincoln Lewis. Brother Lincoln, welcome.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. I take it that you have been hearing a little bit of this our discussion for the last 5 minutes or so. I want to get your preliminary reaction to the murder of Orrin Boston in Dartmouth last week. What's your immediate reaction?
They gone again, killing our young men. Then they take the money from the consolidated fund to pay the families. They shut them out. We have to stop them. My immediate reaction, we have to stop taking this money. And in stop taking this money, we have to do other things. We can't sit down and allow this to go on all the time. Let me look at it this way. This is an orchestrated program by the PPP to dehumanize the African community. Some people will say that you ought not to say this way. We need to use other language. I want people to understand very clear that there's no other language that people can understand than saying it simply. Look, the president was yesterday talking about reparation to the world and telling you what it is and what we must not accept and what Guyana will not accept from the children and the society where the slave masters emerged from. But in right here, they are discriminating or denuding the same community. They go to the UN to say they're advancing their cause for reparation. They're taking away ancestral land, the land from African people. Those who receive land during the PPP time, they only take away the land. They lock up the people who were the operatives who were involved in making sure that those people receive lands. But yet they go to there and they say something else. This issue here of this guy who Boston who was killed is a continuation of the program that started under the Jagdeo regime in the 2000s, early 2000s. All that these guys did is to press the reset button, and they're gone again. We cannot continue to complain. We cannot continue to complain because even those who look like us who are in the government, they will not listen to us because they are at the periphery of the umbrella, but they want to get under the umbrella to be properly sheltered. So yeah, they are going to lose us. They are going to work with the these are the dangerous men and women too, you know. They're going to work with the current government to justify what they're doing. We have to internationalize as a people. We have to internationalize our struggle. Nobody can do it for us. Everywhere that I want to suggest that everywhere, Mr. We must get to the point and strident enough that every way that Mr. Jagdeo and Mr. Orfanali appear, there must be picketing exercise against them. There must be pickets in their face about what they're doing to people here. We cannot sit idly by and just talk about these issues. We have to take action. And while I always say that the greatest strength of the PPP is that they have no shame, they will fight back. But notwithstanding that is that we need to make the world know our side of the story and don't allow them to interpret for the world our narratives. That's it.
You mentioned taking money from the consolidated fund, give to the family. Expand on that for the audience because there are some questions. Apparently, that news is not filtered down to the ground. Expand on that for us.
All right. Every time the police shoot somebody, shoot a young black man, the next thing that happens is that somebody turn up on behalf of the president to extend their condolences and what have you, and to say, oh, we are going to take care of the dead. We're going to take care of the expensive for the funeral. But those people who are being killed, they get children. They're not dogs. They get children. They get families. Some people get wives. You come now, you kill him. You take money, the state money. You say state will take care of him. Come and you pay them. You bury the dead, and everything gone, swept under the carpet after that. We gotta stop this thing. We can't be giving away our young men and women for money. It is reminiscent of those who were sold. What was done? We have to do something about it. Can't allow this situation to be like this.
Lincoln, you made a very important point there, and that is the use of the state money. For me, that is in itself part of the racial assumption, the racist assumption, that you can quiet black people, you can quiet poor people down with money. And that itself is part of the problem. Let me bring you in on that issue, Adriana. This issue of dangling money before poor people and black people whenever there is a tragedy, rather than try to solve the problem, try to put things in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. I want you to speak to that.
Dr. Hines, before I said that, I'd like to say this. I pledge myself to honor always the flag of Guyana and to be loyal to my country, to be obedient to the laws of Guyana, to love my fellow citizens, and to dedicate my energies towards the happiness and prosperity of Guyana. And it is on that basis, Dr. Hines, that I participate in this discussion. And I say that we must not let this happen again. And we must send a clear message to President Ali, the Vice President Barrett Jagdeo, and the others who are in authority. I'm not speaking to the Commissioner of Police here, because this is above the Commissioner of Police head. I'm speaking directly to the President and to the Vice President, that we will not let this happen in our country, whether it be Black men, Chinese men, East Indian men, or Amerindian men. We will not have a police force that goes into the homes of our citizens and kick the doors of our citizens down and shoot our citizens in their beds. President Ali, Vice President Barrett Jagdeo, as a citizen of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, we disallow this in our country. It will not happen again. And so to address the issue now of the economics of it, this is where I'm saying, and this is where the President Ali and his government has to change their mode of governance, because what is being established is that some people are more virtuous than others. And that virtue is as a result of economic status and social status, and perhaps other influences. And it doesn't matter whether the economic status or social status, how they have developed the status. It doesn't matter. But our society, we have a society that's evolving, that once you have a certain economic status and you have a certain social status, then you are more equal than others. Which brings me to the point that Lincoln was speaking about, in terms of there's a higher value on some people than on the poor people who are now being paid to let this matter rest. So there's nobody who's going to necessarily go to jail for this, because we do crime fighting, but we're not doing crime solving. We're not solving crimes in this country. We say we're fighting crimes, but what I would like to see is for us to solve crimes. And so this is something we need to address, Dr. Hines and Lincoln, in terms of how do we have a society that is where there's more equity? How do we have an equity not only in terms of economics, but even in terms of how the law is being administered? So if somebody, like in this case, whoever pulled the trigger, justice must be done, because we have a Criminal Offences Act which says that killing is a criminal offense. And that man was killed in his bed. And therefore justice must be served. Whoever pulled the trigger, somebody, some human being, it wasn't a spirit or a ghost who pulled the trigger, justice must be served. And therefore, when we talk about the economics, it's also about the bigger question of equality. And equality as it relates to the administration of justice, as well as it relates to allocation of resources. And so one of the points, the last point perhaps on this, is to address this whole emergence of a culture where others are more virtuous than others, where some are more equal than others. Our economy is shaped like a triangular shape. What the current President Ali's PPP government is doing, they're narrowing the apex of the triangle. So at the apex at the top, you have a small group of people at the top there who are more equal than others. And it means that the law, we will eventually, or we're probably there already, where the law will not be applied to them equally. What we need to do in terms of the medium to long term, Dr. Hines and Lincoln, is to get President Ali's government to flatten that apex. And in flattening that apex, what it means is that there will be more people at the top of that class. I don't want to call it class, but that group at the top there. What we also need to get President Ali to do in terms of his medium to long-term development program is to the base of the triangle, to narrow that base where you have more people coming up to the middle, not with 19,000 grants and 25,000 grants, right? Where you have more people in the middle there. Once you're able to do that and change the shape of the Guyanese economy from that triangular shape, where you have a huge lower class with people who are poorer, and you have that small apex that's getting smaller, then you're going to have, we will have incidents like these where people are being paid to keep their mouths shut. But what we need to push for is for the government to narrow that broad base in the triangle so that the economy of Guyana then becomes a diamond shape where you have a narrow base, you have a flattened top, and then you have a broad middle. So you have more middle class people there with middle class values who will push for justice. They will not necessarily be thinking merely of survival. And I think that's where we need to push President Ali's government, even as this is the immediate. So we need to address the immediate, but then we need to think of the medium to long term in order to address the issues. Because I have worked for a long time in the international community, and very often the people in the last mile, as we call it, are the ones who suffer. The last mile, as it relates to the poor people, they're the ones who are suffering. So let's get President Ali to reduce that distance between those people who are at the apex and the small group of middle class, if I can put it that way, and shorten that mile of the poorest of the poorest, so that they may be vulnerable, and they may think that, okay, we've lost the breadwinner in our family, so therefore we're going to take some form of compensation and not necessarily advocate for justice.
But Rihanna Thomas, they're talking about what we should ask the government to do. Lots of people in the audience are saying the government will not do anything. We have to talk about what the victims, what Black people will have to do to stop this problem. We're going to come back on the other side and expand on that question. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll try to answer the question, what should Black people do to stop this assault on our community? An assault that has been going on for decades, and it has gotten worse. And to, as somebody's saying here, to ask the murderer to prevent murdering from happening is to ask the impossible. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will address that question. Lincoln Lewis and Adriana Thomas.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Welcome back to Politics 101 on a Thursday evening. We are discussing the issue of extrajudicial killings. And the question that is being asked by supporters of the PPP is what race has got to do with this? Of course, those who have been the victims of racism often are tasked in answering that question. You have to prove racism. That has been a perennial question. We remember in the United States of America after the Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954. The Warren Court made that ruling. Earl Warren, who was a KKK member and was put on the court, and he was the Chief Justice when Brown versus Board of Education was decided, brought an end to legal segregation in America. And for the next decade and a half, Black people did not have to prove racism. What the Warren Court said was that racism was very much part of the system, very much part of the institutions. And so those who charge racism did not have to prove to the court. But as the Warren Court gave way to the Burger Court, we began to see a shift where the court was now asking people to prove that racism does exist. And by the time we got to the Rehnquist Court, what the Warren Court had said was no longer in vogue. Under the Rehnquist Court, you had to prove that something was racist. And now under the Roberts Court, we've seen the doing away with the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, of course, brought African Americans under the 15th Amendment of the American Constitution. But it did more than that. It prohibited Southern states from changing the law, from changing electoral law without permission from the Department of Justice. And what the Roberts Court has done is that it has removed that requirement. The consensus of the court, well, not consensus, the majority of the court said that there is no longer racism. Times have changed. We are no longer 1965. And so if we are post-race, we don't need any protection from racist laws being passed to prevent African Americans from voting. And so what is happening in Texas and what's happening in North Carolina and all of those places, it is because the assumption of the elites is that there is no racism. So when people in North Carolina and Georgia, when they change the laws, they're not doing so because of race. They're doing so to get free and fair elections. Let's come to our Guyana. The problem is not race. The problem is that Black people voted for people who rigged elections. The problem in Guyana is not race, it's rigged elections. And so the burden is put on us, Black people. When we are killed, when we are shot, when there's economic genocide against us, we have the burden of to prove that there is race, that there was racial intent. And when you begin to do that, they call you racist. That is why a lot of Black commentators don't like to touch the issue of race. What's race got to do with it? And racists don't like for race to be discussed. Because when race is being discussed, it forces them to answer. I want them to go around the world. They must go to Brooklyn and explain themselves. They must have the burden of proving that they're not racist. I don't mind them going and talking to the Brooklyn ministers because we finally got them where we want them. That is that the burden is on them to prove that there is not racism. The burden is on them. That's where we have gotten them. We have pushed them. Prior to that, they didn't have to go anywhere and explain anything. But because we have been banging and banging and banging, and finally that big march and rally in Brooklyn the other day, which internationalized the issue, exposed them. The emperor has no clothes now. Let them explain whether there's racism or not. And we have to keep making the point that when young black men are systematically killed, it is damn well racism. No retreat. It may be class, it may be gender. But it is first racist. When they finish killing poor black men, they're going to go to rich black men. They're not immune. The terror that black businessmen have to go through in this country because they're black. Most of the people who've been knocked off since the PPP came to power last year are black middle class people. The damn well racism has no discrimination when it comes to class. They hammer us because we are black. You all have to understand that. They're assaulting, economically assaulting well-to-do black people as they're assaulting poor black people. They're doing it differently, but they're damn well doing it. What's race got to do with it? Everything. That's where they start. Their racial policies may have social implications, class implications. I get that. They have gender implications. I get that. But they start with race. And we must not let up. We must not let up. Let them go to Ghana. Let them go wherever they go. And as Brother Lincoln says, let them answer. For too damn long, we have been answering. The burden was on us to prove that what was being done was racist. We have reached that point now where we have turned the tables on them. That is a big victory. Let them go to Congress in the United States and explain that they're not racist. That's what you want racists to do, to explain. And when they come with their lies, you pound them. Orrin Boston was murdered because of a systemic anti-black racism that has been at the core of policing in Guyana, starting from 1839, when the police force was formed to police black people. The newly freed people who were considered chattel last year. This year they're free. They're still chattel. We can't police them on the slave plantation. We create a police force to police them. And unless you cut something like that off at the neck, it's going to persist for centuries. The end of a system, formal end of a system, does not mean the end of the practice of that system. The practice of racism is alive and well in Guyana. The idea of getting black men to go shoot black men, it's a clever way. And we have to pull the mask off of that to say that those black men who are killing their brothers, that they are part of an institution, a system that is being controlled remotely. By those who are anti-black. Why is it under a black government, extrajudicial killings decreased to almost zero? And why is it 1 year after, with an Indian government, it has galloped? Answer that. They must answer that. I'll bring my guests in back. Lincoln Lewis and Adriana Thomas. Lincoln, I'm start with you. Is Lincoln there? If Lincoln is not there, can we get Miss Thomas in?
Here, brother.
Oh, Lincoln is here. Brother Lincoln.
Let me say to you, David.
Yes.
Unconventional actions need unconventional responses. What these guys have been involved in, and we've been talking all the time, and they are not changing their behavior, we shouldn't ask them anymore. We have to respond differently. That's all I got to say. We have to respond differently to this. This don't require negotiations. We don't require talking. Unconventional behavior. This is what they're doing is not conventional, not acceptable in society. Then the response has to be different. And a time gonna come when people will respond.
I'm gonna come. Lots of people are saying that your proposal that we should get President Ali to do this and do that, that it is not possible in the environment. How do you respond to that?
I think before I respond to that, I'd like to make a comment on, one of the things that's missing in the, I'm going to not hold back because I'm so angry and enraged. One of the things that is my assessment of President Ali's government over the past year that is missing is the adult in the room. The adult in the room who will say this is going too far. Stop. I have no issues with President Granger, but President Granger was the adult in the room. And I know that there was a point when he would have said, don't let it get out of hand. This is going too far. I remember when I was working with Gaisuko, when the sugar workers, when they were doing the reorganization, the sugar workers had walked off of the Rose Hall estate and they were protesting in Berbice. They had the business people and people came out and joined them. And I received a call from a coalition minister who said to me, Adriana, what's the plan that Gaisuko has to manage the situation? We talked about the plan, and then the minister said to me, because the government's position is that the police must ensure that there is peace while the sugar workers protest, but the sugar workers must be protected. This was an APNU and AFC coalition minister who called me and said the position of the APNU and AFC government was that the sugar workers were protesting. They had a right to protest. Their industry was being reorganized, and the police were there to ensure that they are protected and that peace is maintained. And I said, I concur. So I want to say that to say President Granger was that adult in the room. There's no adult in the room in the PPP's government. who will say that this is going too far, who will say that the opposition leader, Joseph Harmon, as the APNU and AFC government, they've gotten almost 217,000 or how many votes according to the last declaration. And therefore the Constitution says that the president of Guyana must engage the leader of the opposition. The Constitution did not put a condition that the opposition leader has to come and bow down to the president. That's not what it says. The Constitution says that the president must engage the leader of the opposition on certain matters. The leader of the opposition represents almost 217,000 people. My point that I am making is that there must be an adult in the room. Just last week, I think the president said that he maintains that the opposition leader must recognize that the government is I have to be, there's a sensitive word. I don't want to misuse the word, that the government is, I don't know if legitimate is the word or something like that. Nevertheless, but I was thinking that there's nobody to say in the midst of us having an issue, border issue, in the midst of that, we need to bring the country together. The government needs to engage with the opposition. We need to ensure that there's internal resilience. Our greatest defense in our border issue is to have strong internal resilience. There's no adult in the room who is saying that. And therefore, I want to make this point because President Granger, irrespective of what we say about him, he was the adult in the room. And I know that there was a point when he would have said, don't let it get out of hand. My concern is that there's no adult who in the room, the PPP room, who will say, don't let it get out of hand. And now to answer your question, Dr. Hines, in terms of I missed the question. Dr. Hines, your audio. I think Dr. Hines' audio is off.
Yes, the question is whether President Ali and President Jack Dio and them are interested in solving the race issue.
I'd like to address that. I noticed that you said President Jack Dio, and in some ways,
yes, and that was deliberate.
President Jack Dio. And I'm happy you raised that because I've noted here that I'd like to address the point of authority. And I think it's time we call President Jack Dio, not President, Vice President Jack Dio out by name. There's a certain characteristic in terms of governance in Guyana under the leadership of Bar Jack Dio, whether he is president or vice president. And as a citizen of Guyana, I want to say to Vice President Bar Jack Dio, I've had enough. Enough is enough. And I am speaking directly to Vice President Jack Dio because in Christianity, we talk about the pulling down of the strongholds and about the strong man. I see Vice President Jack Dio as the strong man in the PPP, the strong man in the government as a stronghold that needs to be changed. And therefore, in my prayer is very targeted in terms of pulling down of the strongholds because I see him as the conduit through which these things are being manifested, if I can put it that way. So as a Christian, I see him as a direct target in terms of my prayer before God. And so I said that to say this, that to say to the vice president, somehow under the leadership of the vice president, and he seems to bring out the worst out of the Guyanese and the people of Guyana. I look at how the investment sector is being managed, and it seems like there's a law of attraction, almost as if sometimes we attract the worst. And I'm saying that Vice President Jack Dio needs to re-examine that. He needs to re-examine the way in which he is governing the country. And I'm saying as a woman, as a mother, that you're putting our women under stress. You are putting our Black women under stress because of this constant way of governing. You're putting not just Black women, but single mothers, women are under stress. And so I am saying to Vice President Jagdeo, as a woman, as a mother, that you are putting us, your government, the way you're governing, you're stressing us out. And therefore, and that is by choice. You have chosen, Vice President Jagdeo, he has chosen that these are the ways in which he will find solutions. When we had the jailbreak and then the crime was increasing, the solution was the phantom squads and the rest of it. And then when there were issues with the APNU, and that stressed this country out. And then there was the whole issue of the issue with the APNU and AFC government. And then the no confidence motion came. Do you know how destructive that no confidence motion was in terms of to the very fabric of the Guyanese society? And then now the government claims that they want to fight crime and they're setting up some security system or something of the sort. And so my point is that I am saying to President Ali, Vice President Jagdeo, that your way of problem solving, of finding solutions to the country, it is stressing the Guyanese people out. And there are other options. There are always choices. And I'm asking that you will find other ways, right? That no confidence motion, you know what it did? It was almost like the vice president wanted to get to the Timeri airport, but he decided that he would rip up the entire East Bank Road to get there. He got to the airport, but nobody else can travel on that road in peace. I am tired of this stress, Dr. Hines. As a woman in Guyana, I stayed here and worked hard. Many of us, we stayed and we worked hard to develop our country. We are single mothers, we are single parents. And to have a government that is constantly stressing us out, we have had enough. Women have had enough.
And the government is stressing you out, Sister Diana. My view is very clear that you have to put an end to that stress. I've said on this program since last week, I don't cry, I don't complain, and we got to put an end to the killing of our people. The responsibility is ours. When the government abandons its people, the people have to create their own form of governance. I'm very clear in my mind about that. If the government don't want to put the opposition on the COVID task force, the opposition must form its own COVID task force. If the government insists on killing our young black men, we have to call on our people to defend themselves. The time has come for us to stop believing that this government means well. It has not. And it was my fear and the fear of a number of us who had our problems with the coalition. Brother Lincoln is here. We were kicked around and kicked out the coalition. Our fear was this, that if we allow the PPP to come back into office, we will have to bawl and wail and cry for our children. The Rastaman said, Marcus Garvey words come to pass. Our fears last year, when we said this government has made mistakes, the coalition has treated us badly, but this is bigger than us. We should not allow a PPP government by itself in power. We, Lincoln and I, were clear about that. Because this is what we feared. And after 1 year, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. Lincoln, come in. Lincoln? Yes. Come on in, Lincoln. You have to unmute.
Yeah. I said this group is on the roll. You know, when we talk about rights and we talk about laws and all kind of things, conventions and what have you, is when we believe that we are dealing with a government that respects the Constitution, laws, and time-honored principles. I have grown to understand now that this group are a group of rulers. They operate by edict. They say what must happen, and they will enforce that. They don't care a damn about anybody. The faster we come to terms and understand this, who we're dealing with, it will be better for us as a people. No longer we should be thinking that they will change course. I never expected them to change course from what they did in 23 years.
Yeah.
I had serious difference with some of my comrades who I told that they will never change. They will never change. There are some operatives in this government that will never change. When you look at them, their behavior, all that you see in them is hate and venom. We have to, unconventional behavior requires unconventional responses. These rulers must not be allowed to continue doing what they're doing. I want to tell you, you know, all this issue about race, and David, you talked about it a little earlier, that we have to prove whether what is being done is racist or what have you. Let me tell the viewers that no one determined my reality for me. No one determined my reality for me. I must know, because I'm the recipient of it, whether it is racist or not. Too often we have been asked to defend ourselves or what we see. We have to stop. We don't have to defend ourselves. We don't have to do that. We seen it. We feeling it. Tell me, why is it that post 2020 election, when we get a new government, why the lands that were taken back, that were given out in the, what you call it, in the coalition, during the life of the coalition government, why the lands were not taken back from East Indians? Why only African people had to give up lands? Tell me, those lands along the Linden, Lethem Road, who get those lands? One check. It's not African people get land there. They're all East Indian. The prime lands were given out under their government. But it was not wrong then. It was not wrong for doing that. It was right. So don't come to ask me to justify racism when people of my ilk are given 5 acres and the other people are given 100 acres.
There you go. There you go.
I'd like to add a point. Sorry.
Yeah.
Quickly, we're on program time. But go ahead quickly, Jan.
Dr. Hines, I wanted to add a point also that one of the things, coming back to the sugar industry, when the reorganization was happening, there was when those sugar workers, when persons were laid off, there was a bank in Guyana that I think they reduced all the interest rate for all of those persons who were laid off that had loans and mortgages at that bank. I need to make that point because these are things people don't understand. But when the public servants were laid off, there's no bank that reduced any interest rate from mortgages or loans for them. So why is it that when one set of people were being laid off, that the loans and the mortgages were, the interest rate was reduced, but for another set of people, when they were being laid off, no bank reduced any mortgage or interest rate. As a matter of fact, the bank will is moving to repossession. The other point that I'd like to make quickly is that racism is like abuse. The person who feels the abuse is the person who will really understand the abuse. And very often they're asked to explain the abuse. And so it is something that you feel. And so someone looking at you smiling and walking down the street, right, they would not understand because racism is like abuse. The other point I'd like to make quickly is that in terms of all societies are constructed, all societies can be deconstructed and reconstructed. And I think the Vice President Barjagdio, during his period as presidency and even now, I think we're seeing him reconstructing our society in a certain way. And the way in which he is reconstructing the Guyanese society, he's an economist and he knows very well what he's doing in terms of economics. So what he's doing, he's reconstructing the society where Black people and other people will be, in terms of their value, reducing their value. And so people will say things like, oh, Black people are like that because of their lifestyle. And people casually say that it's because of Black people lifestyle when there are people like the Vice President who has reconstructed the society so that Black people can be categorized in a certain way. I'm not saying that that's in an absolute sense, but I'm saying that it was intentional in terms of the way that he has orchestrated and designed policies, strategies in the country and implemented those strategies and those policies. I think now what has happened, it is being done in a shameless way, but it is being done in a more subtle way before, but now it is being done in a shameless way. But we need to say to Vice President Barjagdio and to President Ali that every blood that runs through our veins and every bone in our bodies, whether we be Black, Indian, Chinese, Portuguese, we are Guyanese. And we demand that the resources in Guyana be allocated to us equally. We demand that the execution of our Black men stop immediately. We're not negotiating for tomorrow. We are saying that it must stop now, tonight. We are also saying to President Ali and to Vice President Barjagdio that we want to be treated like Black people in Guyana. We want to be involved in decision making. And don't tell us that we voted for the APNU or people voted for the APNU and the ALC and they cannot be involved in decision making. Our constitution says that Guyanese must be involved in the decision making. And we are saying to President Ali and Vice President Jagdio that we've had enough of this dollhouse and this charade that has been going on for the past year. And we need the government. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm going to be as frank because it's painful. It's like abuse, like I said, and except you feel it. I am tired of seeing those public servants who were laid off scrambling for jobs, scrambling to take care of their families. I am in the heart of it because I am the one who was assisting with hampers and all sorts of assistance. While we watch a government that is all sorts of investment is coming into this country, And then President Jagdeo, Vice President Jagdeo went to Texas and came back and said to the people of this country that we cannot expect to benefit from the profits in the oil industry until the next few years. You are asking the people of this country to make the sacrifices. You're telling me that you do not have a plan to design that next year we're going to benefit X amount, the following year. So what are we sacrificing in this country for? And we're saying you're trying to temper the expectations of the people in this country. And we're saying to the Vice President, so while we watch the investments in terms of 200 million US and 600 million US, investors are coming into this country from all over the world. And the Vice President is saying to the people of this country, don't expect to benefit too much until the next couple of years. We're saying to him, no, we want a plan how we will benefit next year from these investments, how we will benefit the next year, how we will benefit the next year. Don't temper our expectations. We have expectations. We want to grow with the investment. We want to grow with the industry. And those are the things I would like to say directly, Dr. Hines, because I think the Vice President needs to understand. He calls it whisper campaign. He says that we have a whisper campaign, the WhatsApp, and so many people are talking. We're whispering anymore, Mr. Vice President. We're not whispering anymore, Mr. President. We are shouting from the rooftop. And we are saying that we want to be treated equally in this country. We demand to be treated equally in this country. We have worked hard. We have contributed. And it doesn't matter whether the AP and you're an AFC won the election or not. We're saying that this tide has to turn now.
It has to turn now. It has to turn now. You get a last one. You have to unmute. You have to unmute. You have to unmute. We're not hearing you.
I said we have to mobilize as a people. It is not something that can be won by one group or another. It's something has to be won by, the change has to come about by a group, by groups coming together. Because you're fighting, as I said, you're fighting a group of rulers. We all have two lands in this process. Let me give you an example of something. The teachers were on the road fighting against what we call mandatory vaccination. This government refused to talk with the representatives of the teachers or even the teachers. The sugar workers went on the road for one day, and then by the next day, they engage the union and they give them what they want. What the government has been doing is using state resources to satisfy persons who they support, who they perceive to be the supporters. And if they perceive you not to be a supporter of their government, they will make sure that you're being crushed. You use state power to crush the group. I'm saying that's the reason why I'm saying that we cannot gain anything singularly. We need to hold hands across groups, across lines, and work towards, come up with a common agenda and identify who the culprits are and deal with them. That's what we got.
So trade unionists and political activists, Adriana Thomas, political and social activist, and a popular commentator who has already announced that she's going to run for president at the next election. I want to thank you guys for coming on and enriching the conversation tonight. We'll keep this conversation going because part of what we have vowed to do is not to forget, to keep this in their faces. Brother, sister, thank you very much. And to you, the audience out there, here with us right through until the end, I want to thank you so much. I want to send my condolences to the Jonases from Linden and Buxton and Firish, And the Buxton side of the family, the Moffatts, they lived in Linden. The father was from Irish. And they've just lost a young son, 29 years old, in suspicious circumstances. And I'm very close with the family here in Arizona, and my thoughts, my prayers, and my condolences. A very upright young man snatched away in suspicious circumstances at age 29. Stay up, my family. Stay up, my friends. And on that note, I want to say to you, the viewers, and to all Guyanese, stay up, stay awake. The young people say stay woke, no? And we've got to keep this fight going. We've got to keep this fight, but we ain't begging anymore. We're not pleading anymore. We're demanding. And we're demanding and organizing in all ways possible. Good night. I don't like to say have a good weekend, but have a productive weekend. Do something for humanity. Do something for Guyanese. Do something for Black people. Do something for your family. Amen. I'm gone. Bye-bye.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.